All right. Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for joining us today for another episode of Infosec Sidekick Podcast. This is episode number 4, and we're here today to talk about some really exciting stuff, the incident response process, teamwork, and all that kind of stuff with someone who I happened to reconnect with. It's actually a funny story I think we'll get into later. But anyway, let's get right into it. This is episode number 4, and we have Daniel Shore, PhD, on with me here. Daniel, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I've been really quiet while you did that intro, so it's exciting just to say, hey.
Yeah, man. And I kind of alluded to it a little bit before, but it's been what, like 8 or 9 years since we last chatted.
Been 8 of them.
Yeah. So really, really crazy to have you on the podcast. But this is exactly, I think, why I started it, was to reconnect with people like yourself. And, I'm really excited to talk about what you've been doing over the past 8 years. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
crazy long
we have a lot
time.
to catch up on.
Yeah. So I figured, hey, let's record it, talk about it. Maybe some of it will help the listeners out there. But before we hop into that, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you're working on these days?
Yeah, my name's Daniel Shore. I live in the DC area, and I have a PhD in workplace psychology, more formally industrial organizational psychology. The essence matters more than the name, and the essence is how to make people feel their best and be their best at work, and how to create organizations where people can thrive and give people the power to bring that to the organization, so that it's not just a top-down approach, but how do we build that from the bottom up and give people that grassroots excitement of owning the job they do and owning the work they do, and really being proud of what they're accomplishing and feeling good and finding opportunities to motivate themselves, rather than have the carrot on the stick dangling in front of them, but just to have their own bag of carrots.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So it's such, I think, for me at least, working in cybersecurity and incident response and everything, uh, it's such a different field, right? Psychology, man. I think I think it's fascinating, and a lot of the work you do plays a large role into pretty much every career field's day to day, right? It's just more of a subtle thing, or in your world, more direct. I don't know. Talk to me about how your studies applied there a little bit more.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I developed the core of my work that I do now. So I started an LLC called Strategies for Effective Teamwork. And the purpose of the LLC is to go into organizations and work with leaders and with employees at all levels to help foster an environment where people can be who they want to be in their workplace, and make sure that the work they do is valuable to them, and also that the people leading them and the people that you're leading, that those interactions are just filled with respect and kindness and compassion and authenticity. And all of that I do started and really developed in the cybersecurity space, which is how we met originally in 2012. You were at this, we were both at the event, MACCDC, the Mid-Atlantic Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. I looked it up, I memorized it, we're good. And you were there as a participant, and I was there with my research team. We were just getting started on research around cybersecurity teamwork. And that's what we were hired to do through a contract with the Department of Homeland Security. We teamed up with this amazing team, including HP Labs and the I3P Center at Dartmouth. And we were just starting to build this powerhouse of a research engine to understand how people in cybersecurity work as teams, but pulling from our expertise in all kinds of different industries. And now part of the work I'm doing is translating that back to all these industries, not just in cyber, but I have a big place in my heart now for cybersecurity in that community. And and to reconnect with you as we did just recently, and now to be here getting to share that work, that's part of my dream.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you brought up the MACCDC. I just want to provide a little bit more color for the folks who might not be familiar. Um, if anyone's worked with me in the past and is listening to this, they probably heard about it because it's played such a huge role in my career. And I think it was especially interesting that Daniel was there all those years ago looking at it and trying to see what they could learn about teamwork in that environment. Because for me as a participant, and just to back up a little further, it was an inherit and defend cybersecurity competition. It was 8 teams from 8 schools participating at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, I believe, in Maryland.
Yeah.
And we sat down and got these networks that were intentionally flawed, built by some awesome people in the industry that are fairly well known now, and basically had business injects thrown at us as a team. So we had to work under pressure to keep this simulated business environment up and running. But at the same time, there was a red team, penetration testers, who volunteered their time so kindly to come destroy us in hilarious ways and really have a lot of fun with that. And so it really put us students in an environment where, dude, we didn't know what the hell we were doing, to be completely honest. I mean, we had some experience in labs, and a lot of us, including myself, put a lot of time outside of school into just trying to figure out how we were going to win this thing.
And it was like a day and a half, 2 days of doing that. I mean, you were really in it to win it.
Yeah, it was the Super Bowl, man, for us. I mean, in the most nerdy way possible. I just remember some of the best times, like skipping homework to study for this thing and really make an impact here. And it's almost like being on a traveling soccer team, right? Like we would pack into vans and drive down from college and get hotels and participate in this multi-day event. They even had the pit, right, where all the teams would go, and you couldn't go in and out unless you had a badge. But people like yourself were able to really observe and not, we won't get into this, but we also had corporate sponsors that were there kind of doing the same thing that you were doing, but rather than doing research, they were looking at us from a hiring perspective. And
I do remember that I had some limit on my badge, that at some point I was able to like get into the pit, but I couldn't like go another step farther closer to, and it was fine. I mean, we were coming in to observe the teamwork, but that didn't really require us to see the screens or really, I mean, our background was never in cybersecurity. That's why HP Labs and Dartmouth I3P were on board to provide that expertise. But I do remember being stopped by one of the like National Guard guards and having to go back to some taped box where I was able to stand with my quote unquote clearance level.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And all that to just kind of paint the picture of how serious I think that scenario was and why you guys actually went there to conduct some of your research. So with that, I guess setting the stage, Daniel, you and I met at that event. You interviewed me, I think, just for some of your research. I'd really be interested to go back and see my answers to that, having 8 years under my belt, now working in actual incident response.
I recall you being very competent.
Well, that's good to know. I'd still probably cringe at some of my answers, but that's just how I think we all are.
I'd cringe at my questions. We're all better people than we were.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of how we met, and it's really cool to come connect with you again after all that time and talk about your research really and the work you're doing with your LLC now. So I don't know where you want to start. I mean, how did everything go? 8 years later, what's the deal?
Yeah, well, from the time I met you, it was about 4.5 years more of work on that project alone. And I mentioned we had this amazing research team. We had funding from Homeland Security. We were doing interviews. We were going back into research from other industries and trying to pull out the insights that were relevant. We were working here in the United States. We were going over to interview teams in Europe. We were doing public sector, private sector, really spanning the gamut of cybersecurity teams to understand what was it that were commonalities and differences across those different sectors and different verticals and horizontals within cybersecurity. And then the big task at the end was how to deliver that information in a way that cybersecurity teams could actually use. And we got pretty far in that process. We ended up with a 300-page manager handbook, almost a manual, a guide, whatever word you want to use. But it lays out the research, the principles of teamwork, these foundational pieces of teamwork, and then for each piece of the teamwork, and we'll talk a little bit about how we laid it out and how that's helpful in using the information. But for each piece of how teams operate, we laid out the research, and then we laid out the strategies and recommendations. And encompassing all of that, we created assessments so that you can figure out, is this an area that I want to read about, learn about, and change for the way my team is operating? And that's whether you're a team lead or whether you're a member of a team. And ultimately, our goal was to help find ways that teamwork could be improved, and not just within one team, but also within a system of teams, a multi-team system, and thinking about where does cybersecurity need to go socially and behaviorally, in addition to all the magnitudes of technical advancement that are required along the way.
Nice. Yeah. So, um, you man, the amount of work that goes into these research projects and just obtaining, masters and PhD, all this stuff it requires such a level of dedication. And I mean, the work product that comes out of that, and it just seems like it's so valuable. And I think we talked about this a little bit in our call before, but some of the work that you're trying to do, I think, is make that 400-page manual a little bit more accessible to people, right? Because the fact is, people are only going to get so far into some of that stuff, and maybe they'll find tidbits that are very relevant to them.
Yeah. And
But go ahead.
I'll second that. The itch that I had that wasn't being scratched at the end of that project was getting it into the hands of managers. It was living as this document and sitting passively on some websites and, in some repositories. And, there were some copies that we printed out, physical copies. We were taking those to some of the workshops and teamwork trainings that were happening early on. And I just wanted more of that. I dedicated, as you said, so much time and energy into the project, and so did everyone else. And I didn't want our work to be sitting on a shelf when I knew that it was worth sharing. And I was really, our whole team was so proud of the work that we had done, and somehow there needed to be an ambassador. So I took that on, and that's where I'm coming from now.
How many people were on your research team?
It cycled through a little bit. People graduated and came in and out. We had professional people from HP Labs and also from I3P, and then we had our faculty members. So I like to think of it as how many adults and how many kids were on it. We had 6 to 8 really dedicated adults working on it, and then it must have been, there were probably about 20 kids that touched that project at some point or another, and always a core group of 10 of us working, all together on it at once, and then people coming in and out. But yeah, it was a whole family affair, and and definitely well over 20 people putting their time and energy into it along the way.
Great. Yeah. So a lot of man hours. This was being funded, and clearly someone found a need for this. So I think one of the things that might help frame the research before we talk about it is why it was conducted, right? So
Yeah.
do you feel like that's a good place to kind of start here?
Yeah, let's go there. Why was a question that we never fully had the answer to along the way. Part of the first part of the project was trying to figure out why, and then as we continued doing that, and then started putting pieces into place in this deliverable, this handbook, and what the outcomes were going to be, we continued learning. The why really was constantly evolving. But if I had to nail it down to one piece that became really clear to me, it would be that Homeland Security wanted us to come in and distill the social and behavioral elements of what tends to be a pretty egocentric field. IT and cyber tends to be pretty egocentric. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying egotistical. That anyone else can make those judgments for themselves. I don't think that is something we came across, but what we did come across was egocentricity. And in preparation for our conversation, I looked it up because in my mind and in my brain, I knew egocentric was what we were talking about, but I looked it up, and the origin of egocentric comes from two words. One is ego, which is that piece about myself and who I am. And then the centric part comes from geocentric. It actually, the original concept of that the Earth is the center of the solar system. And then they put them together and they got egocentric. So the question is, how do you combine the definitions? And it really comes down to the textbook definition being centered in or arising from a person's own perspective. It's just what you know, and it's how you go about the world. But it's not that I think I'm the only person who can do it. It's just human nature. And so what we wanted to do was understand how human nature can be shifted and molded to become team nature and to become multi-team nature, so that we take the people and we foster this sense of collective problem solving and collective work.
Yeah, man. I personally have a lot of interest in that type of study, right? Of just figuring out why we do what we do, and I think that's a pretty good read. Like, most of my experiences are that people, I mean, just being completely uneducated in this and like not sticking to formal definitions and all, in the technology fields and cybersecurity and in IT, we do want to do a lot of it ourselves, and there's some pride built in there. There's uh you know we want to be seen as successful and do a lot of that stuff, and so when it comes to specific pieces of the IT puzzle or security puzzle that require that teamwork more than others, that is a lot of times where you find people dedicated to figuring out ways to improve it, right? And case in point is my job, pretty much for the last 4 years, I would say, has been to find ways to improve teamwork and build relationships and build trust, right? So I hadn't come across your research. I'm really glad I did, now, because I imagine there's going to be a lot of directly applicable things that I can pull from that, um, you know, and hopefully you create a more digestible way for me to do that, after this call.
That's
Uh,
the dream. That's
yeah,
how to get people who, especially in leadership positions, to digest this, see the value in it, and what it can bring to make their jobs easier and more effective. Um, the sense that people are egocentric and that's how they're coming into their work means that we need to think of ways to create a process and a system that encourages them to act in a more other-centric manner or in a collectively centric manner, so that it's not about I need you to change as a person as much as how can I put you into a system that's going to allow you and encourage you to work with other people.
Right. And would you say that the default state of everyone is egocentric?
I think the default state is wanting to feel a sense of accomplishment. I think that people want to feel a sense of accomplishment, and it's hard to know if you're not used to working with other people. It's hard to see the value in doing that, or hard to see how working with other people isn't going to devalue or diminish what you're accomplishing. And I feel that as an entrepreneur and just really starting to expand my repertoire and number of projects that I'm working on, and I'm talking to other people and I'm working with other people, and I find myself guarding my ideas, and I have to push myself, and I'm not I'm not in the tech space. I don't generally have that mindset, but when it comes to feeling like you're doing something and you want credit, where credit is due, it's really hard to let go sometimes and to bring other people into that space and to share those ideas. And one of the most profound things I've read as I learn what it means to be a startup and what it means to put yourself out there is to not be afraid that of those ideas. No one from a business standpoint, from an LLC standpoint, no one's going to be as passionate about the work I'm doing as I am. And if I'm connecting and contacting good people, they're going to want to work with me, not instead of me. And bringing that mindset into a space like cybersecurity requires a lot of trust.
Right. I agree. Good perspectives. So Daniel, I think we should jump a little bit into the research here.
Yeah.
So where do you think the best place to start is? I mean, talk a little bit about the handbook, what actually, it contains inside there.
Yeah, let's do that. And I think I'm gonna kind of lay out what the handbook provides, and then I want to actually jump back to this idea of being egocentric and how to make people. One of the first steps of helping people work with others is helping them understand and be aware of what it means to be egocentric, and especially be sure they know that you're not calling them egotistical, which is again a nuanced distinction, but I think a really important one here, and one that in this conversation, I think really pushes the envelope on how we view the work that we do, and be honest with ourselves and with people as a team. So what we created out of that research was something we refer to as a social maturity model. And that's the essence. Is the word social first, is the idea of how people work together and interact with each other. And then the maturity piece is to give it a growth mindset, because wherever you are now, there's room to grow. And there are different areas of teamwork where you might prioritize growing, but it's all about growth and how you, in the same way that a person matures, how you as a team mature, or you as a multi-team system can mature. And we didn't come up with the idea of maturity, but we added the social piece. The idea of maturity, actually, and I don't know, Travis, if you're familiar with this, but there's a researcher in the Netherlands whose name is Don Stickvoort. Have you ever heard that name?
No.
All right. Well, I have, so I'm happy to educate a little bit.
Please.
Don Stickvoort is a researcher out of the Netherlands, and he and his team came up with a maturity model for cybersecurity teams. And that maturity model included 4 quadrants. So close your eyes, picture this matrix 2x2. There's organization, that the organization, I should say, that the team lives in. They're the tools that the team uses. They're the humans on the team, and they're the processes that the humans go through to use the tools to protect the organization. And what we did is we honed in on the human piece, the piece where we were experts in workplace or organizational psychology. Our expertise is the human experience within organizations. That's the psychology piece that we bring. And so we leveraged our expertise to really home in on that part of the quadrant. And once we did that, then we blew it up into its own maturity model. And so that's what we call the social maturity model. And there are 9 areas. And I know when you're listening, it's a little hard to wrap your head around, but I'm just going to go through those bullet by bullet real quickly. And we can always come back to any of them in particular. But the overarching goal here was to break down teamwork into as many areas as we needed to understand that teamwork is a really broad term. And within teamwork, we came across collaboration triggering. How do you begin the collaboration process? Communication skills and protocols, information sharing, collaborative problem solving. Again, getting away from that egocentric, oh, I see a problem, how do I solve it? But how do we solve it? Shared knowledge of unique expertise, understanding what everybody's areas of strength are. Trust, adaptation, collective learning, and conflict management. And when you break down teamwork, don't cut me off yet. When we break down teamwork into those 9 areas, that's when I can help a manager or a member of one of these teams not just think about the work they do, but how they do that work. And then we dive in and figure out which of those areas are you doing well at? Which of those areas do you want to improve upon?
Yeah, no, so that's awesome, man. I think, listing out those 9 areas and just hearing them and analyzing them based on my background and what I know about cybersecurity, I just see immense value in exploring all of those different things. And one of the things we talk about on this show is all the different aspects of cybersecurity and all the different career paths you can take and all the different types of teams you might find yourself leading, but they all apply to all of those teams, I think. So I'm just looking at it through one lens and trying to step back a little bit to your view, to really see that. And I think really all I'm trying to say is I'm interested. You know.
That's great. Me too. This is stuff that I think has a lot of value, and in this world of complexity with what cybersecurity teams or SOCs or NOCs are up against, we got to all work together.
So yeah, the world is complex, and I think, just being selfishly talking about cybersecurity obviously is complex. It's the next step in the IT ecosystem and really understanding it, and at a base level, and understanding how to fix the worst of the worst, and prevent the worst of the worst. So I guess one of the bullets that stuck out to me was that initial, if you can remind me what that one was.
Yeah, collaboration triggering.
The collaboration triggering, right? So
right.
Maybe we can hone in a little bit on that particular one. I don't think we can, get into the details of all 9 of these things on the time that we have today. But, what were your thoughts there? I mean, what were your observations on that complexity and the collaboration triggering piece?
I love that you picked that, and it just so happens that that's kind of where the maturity model starts, going from left to right. And the reason that I like you pick that is because it really brings us right back to the egocentrism piece, that any collaboration starts with one person. And that's something that in organizational psychology hasn't really been delineated in that way. And we saw it right away in the initial research we were doing in cybersecurity. And then it just started to make sense that no matter how complex or how dangerous a threat is or an anomaly in the data is, it's being seen by one person. And that one person has a lot of weight on their shoulders because they have to make some decisions. And a lot of the times what we were seeing is that someone would make a decision. We'd have them do like a walkthrough with us. All right, take us through an event, that happened recently and tell us how you got from point A to B to C and so forth as you worked your way through that event. And the first thing everyone said was, well, I saw an anomaly in the data and I started to explore. I started to figure out, can I see the source? Can I understand what that represents? Can I understand if it's a threat or if it, is just a glitch in our internal system? From that moment, that person has started to go down a decision-making path that is either going to lead them to say, I know enough about what I'm seeing that I can handle this, or the road less traveled, I think, in many situations is I need to bring someone else in. And then once you make that decision, depending on which path you go down, there are other decisions to be made. So once you say, all right, I'm going to try to handle this myself, well, then I have to make a response plan and I have to, go through the response plan and figure out what's this going to do once I put it into action, and is that going to work? And if it is, then I'm going to implement it. Or am I going to explore, get more information, or maybe I don't even know where to go for more information and say, oh, someone else needs to get involved in this. And that's, again, back to that trust piece, that you can feel it. It's visceral, that if I'm going to bring other people in, I have to want to bring them in. I have to trust them. And I think I have to see the value in bringing them in, that I don't have to be a hero on my own every time. I don't have to have all of the answers. And, I'm going to maybe digress or go deep. I don't know which direction this is, but we're not building systems that incentivize collaboration. We're not demonstrating how great it is when people work together. We're not lauding the people who bring other people in. And that's actually, I think, at a societal level as well. That's part of being in an individualistic society, that we praise the person for what they do. It's so rare that we create, team level adulation or team level rewards, recognition, whatever it may be. There's so many places where there's an employee of the month. Well, guess what? The employee of the month didn't get to that point on their own. Well, assuming they actually deserve to be employee of the month, that's a separate podcast as well. And some of the other research I've done about rewards and recognition. But that person, why are they so good? Actually, all right, now we're really going down a rabbit hole.
I love it. I love it.
This is how we get into the fun. Think about the MVP of a sports league.
Shout out Lamar Jackson.
Shout out. Never is that MVPism connected to the people who help make that person MVP. You might know the team, but you never know the names. There's no footnote with every MVP that says, oh, and by the way, here are the people who were on their team that helped make them better. I mean, I'm watching The Last Dance about Michael Jordan, and just the level of devaluation that Scottie Pippen experienced and continued to experience as they were winning championships. And that's just Scottie Pippen. That's just the number 2 guy. Then there's the number 3 guy who makes Scottie good, and the 4 guy, and then you have 5 people working together on a team. We just aren't creating systems that incentivize that. So when we come back now to the cybersecurity example, that I see an anomaly in the data, and I have to decide not only how I'm going to handle it, but I'm obviously, as a human, thinking about what's in this for me. Like, what can I accomplish? What's my achievement going to be? How is my boss going to recognize that? And you're a team lead. You're coming at this from a supervisory level and thinking about, what is in place for you to incentivize and motivate people to actually work together.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I love the analogy and um, that little sidebar that you just went off on that, because it really helps paint the picture. And I know for the people listening that are, cybersecurity practitioners, we're all thinking about different scenarios right now, and kind of digesting that information in a different way. But I really hope everyone is trying to critically think about that and how it applies. um it's you know it's that struggle that maybe your tier one SOC analyst is having on your team, that they don't want to be Scottie Pippen, right? They want to be Michael Jordan. And the risk that actually poses to your organization. I mean,
Yeah.
right? Like
To your
that.
system, to the systems you're protecting, and the companies you're protecting. And we just scratched the tip of the iceberg on that. I mean,
Yeah.
I strongly believe in going into an organization as part of my work and assessing how rewards and recognition or incentives and motivations are being perceived by the employees, because that's really what matters. You might have a team recognition system, but do they feel that way? Like, even
Yeah.
within that, is there something where there's a little more credibility or achievement level that can be earned if you do X, Y, or Z? And within this whole system of, I mean, we've just talked about the initial decision, but let's say that I decide to bring other people in to help handle whatever this incident or event is, and then I have to decide, are we going to work together, or am I going to hand it off to you?
Mm.
uh, Now that's a whole nother you know uh, mental exercise in trust, and also in incentives and motivation, because if I give this to you and then you resolve the issue, I'm not even involved anymore. And is there any incentive to say, like, wow, you did it's, we do this with kids, like, you did the right thing,
Right.
we and are we using language, and are we talking to people in a way that really helps them feel good about bringing other people in, about knowing when it is the right time to hand something off or to stay collaborating? And that
Yeah.
that decision tree continues to sprout different branches, because you hand it off, what's that next person going to do with it? We collaborate, how are we working together?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. It's crazy, man, that we're just scratching the surface, but all of these things are just such. I mean, you can see the value in it, in assessing these things within your organization. So I know we don't have much time left, but we have infinite stuff that we could dive into. So I want
Sure.
to try and like drive this the best way that I can to kind of finish strong here.
Yeah.
Um, what do you do to come in you know and assess just that part of the process, right? Like, so someone who's listening who knows that they need to get better at this, or they want to at least see where they are here, you know,
Yeah.
I guess, can they do it on their own, like real quick right now? And like, how can you kind of come in and help potentially expand on that? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. Yes, you can do it on your own, and I, encourage that as an initial step to figure out, do you think there's a need for more, to go further into this space and really explore. What I find, though, is that coming in as a third party, I have a huge value add in that people are far more open to me than they are to their supervisor. I do this not just in cybersecurity. I actually do a lot of work with summer camps and nonprofit youth organizations, and I go in and I listen. Step one to me is listen, and it's exciting. It's exciting to hear where people are at, honestly and authentically, and to figure out what they need in order to help you and them and the whole organization succeed. Because people have a lot of thoughts and feelings around their work, and we rarely create the space to respect that and to hear it. And I don't want to get too touchy feely, because the assessment itself is quantitative.
Right.
But the conversations that come out of that quantitative assessment are infinitely human.
Right.
And an example here is that you have the leader fill out an assessment of how the team is on these certain areas, or the rewards and recognition piece, in addition to these areas of cybersecurity, social maturity, and teamwork. And you have the team members fill it out. And then I come in to facilitate the conversation about where those quantitative ratings are similar and where they're different. Because you've got to create understanding, you've got to create trust. And I will say something that I think is very true, is that in all organizations, and I saw it in cybersecurity as well, the channels of communication are not wide open. And that's a challenge, and we need to find ways to open it. And I'll tell you, that requires being a little vulnerable, showing some humility, and not being afraid, but seeing the longer term value of opening up those channels so that you can really talk, understand, and work together in a way where everybody knows that this is for the good of them and the team and the organization. We're going to have to get into psychological safety at another time, but that's a huge piece of it, and huge piece of building trust, that the way we communicate, the systems we put in place, we have to evaluate them, and we have to figure out where we can improve, and how we can do better as a team and as people.
Absolutely. So, yeah, really good stuff, man. I think, just to close the loop on my end, I almost feel bad because we talked about so much stuff. Like, I wish we could dive in on this, but the good news is you're available to people. Your research is available to people. There's, I think you mentioned a good one pager to kind of like digest some of this stuff. So if you're cool with it, we can include that in some of the resources for the podcast.
Yeah. I'm
And
all about making these resources available, and then empowering leaders to ask their own questions first, and figure out how we can partner together to achieve their goals. And I do believe in individual achievement, and I just don't believe in doing it at the cost of working together. I believe in doing it in collaboration and synergy with working together. So definitely sharing the resources. I'm all about it. My email is just daniel@effectiveteam.work. And that's also the website, effectiveteam.work. And this is the door is open. This is the beginning of I think, great conversations between you and I that will continue. And I'm excited about where I can come and partner with great people who want to take this on and bring it to their organizations.
yeah, perfect. Awesome. And thanks for that sign off. So uh, one more time, the email address for everyone.
Daniel @ which is an A with, no, I'm just kidding. Daniel@effectiveteam.work.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'd really encourage anyone out there who's listening who feels that teamwork is important. I am so huge on the emotional aspect of our jobs, mental health included. That's a big topic nowadays. I think this touches on that hardcore. If this is on your mind and you feel like it's important, work with Daniel, at least just to start the conversation. It's something that I'm most likely going to be doing after this. I just so much work was put into this. Why are we not taking advantage of it? I think it's something that I myself think a lot about by default, but I've never quantified it or put it into a matrix, a maturity model. I love maturity models. I know a lot of people out there do.
Yeah,
So
that's your
it
chance.
yeah, it makes sense, right? So
Travis,
any
I want to jump in and just say thank you
yeah,
for the opportunity to come on. And as my career is getting going, these kind of relationships I really value, and it's fun to talk. It's fun to chat about the stuff we love doing.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks, and thanks to you, Daniel. I really appreciate you being an early guest on the podcast while we still
Early
work out
adopter.
some kinks.
#early adopter.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Awesome. Well, that concludes episode number 4 of the Infosec Sidekick Podcast with Daniel Shore, PhD, talking about some awesome stuff, teamwork. Hit him up, and We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Travis.